I can't read and talk. I definitely can multitask on some things, but trying to read and then read one question and answer another, it's just beyond me. So Kathy is going to actually be firing the questions to me. So she'll be looking at those. And we've also got Shireen. A big thanks to Shireen because she's actually helping monitor both the chat and the Q&A box as well. So thanks very much indeed to both of you there. So is as Angus has very kindly said some very nice things about me, but yes, you say my background is, and as a new graduate, I came into the sector, and as my grandmother kept telling me, I would eventually get a proper job. But I've had a proper job for many, many years. I say working as in all sorts of different roles in fundraising, but definitely helping support fundraisers and fundraising teams achieve what they can achieve in terms of the best in terms of income for their organisation, so those organisations and charities can go on and do the incredible and fantastic things that they're doing. We are in challenging times, but you say, when you're as old as me, as Angus likes to remind me, we've seen some things. And whilst we've never seen a global pandemic before, we've had all sorts of different things over the years that have been challenges to fundraising. I will put my hand up and say, I think this is the most challenging, but we've had recessions, we've had ups, we've had downs, we've had other things. And there's nothing like a fundraiser as someone who can be creative, inventive, and definitely wants to make the most of new opportunities that crop up. But as a result of that, we should remember some of those good old traditional things. We might just change the way that we actually communicate to our supporters and the way that we thank. But again, sometimes it's still those good old foundations of the basic and the bedrock of our fundraising. But we are sort of needing to say, move on. And some things that were starting to happen before out there in the fundraising world have been speeded up. And some things that were starting to slow down, we've now this moment in time put to one side. So I'll just give my quick advert for our next session, which is on the 2nd of February, which is when I'll have the tissue ready, because it's the last of our 5 and I've really enjoyed being with you on these sessions. So it will be a sad moment at 12 noon on the 2nd when we finish those, but we are going to be thinking about digital fundraising in that session. But moving on to today then, is say to make the most of today, just to reiterate, I know I said during the time when people were joining us, but could I just ask you, say, to use the chat function to connect with each other, share your contact details, make the most of the fact, we've got 275 fundraisers out there. It's a great chance to network. I'm a huge, huge fan of networking. There's times when I just want to know something or want to confirm something and go to my network that's out there. And I'm always developing that. So again, feel free if you do want to connect via LinkedIn. Use the Q&A function, though. That's the box that we are really monitoring for the questions that we will be taking after the presentation element of this webinar. So you say, put your questions in there. Hopefully we'll get to do most of them, but you say with so many people on the last session, I know we couldn't get to them all. We tried to group them and give you some overall advice around those. Also, if you've any tech issues, stick those in the Q&A. And again, that's being monitored by Shireen and Kathy, who will help try and sort that out for you. Okay, well then moving on. So what we say today is about, it's about, as we've said, fundraising, your fundraising message in current times. And fundraising really is a communication process. And so we're going to be, you as fundraisers are sharing a message. And that is basically why someone should actually be supporting your organisation. So what we're going to be doing is talking about developing your case for support. We're going to be linking that to donor motivations and some of that background, that psychology that's going on in a donor, a prospective donor or supporter's head. And then we're also going to be sharing some hints and tips for success. I said I joined as a new graduate. My background is in psychology. And early on, lots of people said, oh, you're not really using your degree. Well, I love the fact there's loads and loads of psychology behind fundraising. And so we're going to try and get into the heads of some of our donors today and share some insights that hopefully will make your message that you're trying to communicate so that it is as effective and inspirational and motivational, enabling people to be informed about your organisation and what you're trying to do and know how they can actually get on board and support you. So you say, we talk about your message very often using that sort of internal jargon. We talk about your case for support, but it's basically why someone should actually support your organization. So when we're actually sort of developing this, a really good point to start is think of it as a skeleton. And that's how I like to think of it, is something that will then, have our sort of main sort of framework as that sort of skeleton's bones. I hope you like this image. And then you say, add some flesh to it a little bit later on. So, that starting point of our case for support, what do you do? Why do you do it? Why should we support you? Those are some key things that we should be building in as that skeleton. Again, I say I'm going to share some extra thoughts now, but again, I just want to refer you to say that Ecclesiastical Fundraising Hub website, because there is actually a section there on case for support. Obviously, we're talking a bit more about it, and there's some more slides to come, but again, I just wanted to give you a reference point so you can actually follow up subsequently. So when we are starting to flesh out and put some flesh on those skeletons' bones, you say it's all about thinking about, what questions would a potential donor and supporter want to ask, or what would they need to know before they feel in a position to make that decision about how to support you or whether to support you. So some of those questions that is so vital to get across. What's the issue or problem that you either want to overcome or want to change or want to improve? That's so important. And I often call that my point A. We've got to make sure we cover point A. We need people to know where we are now. It's that snapshot. And also we need to communicate what is that problem or the particular issue of why we are doing something. And this is it. Why is your organisation the best place to actually help solve or overcome that issue or problem? Who's going to benefit and how? Now, I'm saying there primary and secondary, and so often we've got the primary beneficiaries, but we might have secondary beneficiaries. So it might be an individual who is the primary beneficiary, or a group of individuals. It might be, and I'm going to use this as an underlying example throughout. So it may be children who've been bereaved. That is possibly your primary beneficiary. But then there's secondary beneficiaries. That could be the rest of their family. It could also be their friends. It could be their classmates at school or working from home, depending what way they're doing it at the moment. But it's who is going to be the primary beneficiary, but also think about the wider impact. And sometimes that adds that extra value, or sometimes in the numbers game, you think, well, there's only a few people affected in that way. But you say directly, but indirectly, there's a lot more people often going to benefit as a result of whatever the intervention is that you're going to do as an organisation when you've got the money that you're trying to raise at the moment. So what difference will the donors' support make? That's vital. And we're going to talk more, and we're going to talk about some of those motivations a bit later. But one key motivation that is always there, usually, well, I say usually there, is that donors want to make a difference. So that is what we need to share when we communicate. What will the difference their input make? So it might be their input is volunteering, because obviously our case for support, we use it when we want to get cash. So we're actually asking sometimes, will you support us and give us X amount of money? Or will you sign up and be a member? Will you sign up to a direct debit? Will you adopt something? Again, referring back to some of the other things that we've talked about in earlier sessions. Or it's, will you fundraise for us? Will you run a half marathon, or will you climb Mount Everest by going up and down your stairs? My dogs seem to be trying to do that at the moment. I don't know if that's a hint they're not getting enough exercise. Then we need to think, what will they get back in return? Now, sometimes there is a tangible benefit. It may be they are signing up to that cycle challenge that you've got going on, even if they are going to be doing it on their own. But you might send a T-shirt to them, or that cycle vest, that bit of lycra for them, if they actually get to the £100 mark. It might be a crowdfunding appeal, and they get a photo of the finished thing as something, as an incentive. It may be you're actually asking them to give to your shop. And so again, they may be saying the knowledge that their gift is going to turn into cash, or they may be shopping in your shop as a way to support you, but also they fancied a new red jumper for something not that they're going out at the moment and not that they're able to shop in your shops, but they may be doing that through eBay. As again, I know many charity shops have pivoted and they're sort of offering things on eBay. So how much do you need and when do you need it? So what we try and to get across in any sort of message is the urgency. Especially at the moment, there's so many demands on people and organisations' cash. So we need to get across the element of urgency. Because otherwise, if you say we're going to do this next year, and I can say this now because we are in January 2021, I couldn't have said this, say December to make the same point. But yeah, if it's only going to happen in 2022, oh my goodness, as someone receiving that message, you're thinking, well, actually, this £20 I'm going to donate, I want to give it to someone who's going to use it now, not just sit in a bank account waiting to be used next year. There is one exception, though, in terms of our case for support, where we need to avoid that urgency. And that is when we are looking for gifts in wills, when our message is about trying to secure or encourage people to say to leave a gift in the will, or as we often refer to it as that legacy. Obviously, we can't say, we need your money urgently, so please will you die soon so we can have your gift. I am being very, very flippant, but that is where we want to talk about, we've been here for a long time, we want to be here well into the future. When will life returns to normal? And those sorts of phrases that we want to start including. But the rest of the time, we need to talk about some sort of urgency. And that is so key at the moment. We need to be spending the money. We need to be solving problems. We need to be changing lives. We need to be making a difference. And we need to be doing it now. There's lots of people out there in need. And that is one of the things that will motivate our supporters and donors. So we need to get that across. But again, we are in a very competitive market. And sometimes we say it's thinking about what are the resources out there and do people have the cash? So again, we need to make it emotive. We need to be inspirational. We need to be motivational and inspire people that they want to get involved and support us and our organisations. So who else is supporting and how will you secure all your funding? Now, again, if you're doing a quick sort of, email appeal, you might not go into lots and lots of detail, but if you're trying to raise a significant amount of money, you might actually want to share some, about where else you may be getting some money. Something that dropped out of the Radio Times that I get sort of delivered each week was something from Practical Action. And within that, it's really making a good point. As I say, it's about climate change destroying lives, and big change starts small. The tiny seeds that are turning the tables on climate change. But what it does say is donate before 9th of March. So we've got that urgency in there because your gift will be matched by UK government. And this is with the UK aid. So not only is it helping to get across the urgency, because then they're going to be spending the money on this particular project, but also they're giving us an indication of where more money will come from. But also there's a lovely incentive there is, basically your £5 will turn into £10. And my goodness, if you then gift aid it, you might have given £10 to turn into £20, but your gift will then be worth £12.50 as well. So it's really good there. And we're definitely capturing some of that motivation, some of that urgency, and also who else is actually getting involved. But also, if we can, so especially if we're talking about big sums of money, what we need to try and do sometimes is link to smaller amounts to be specific. Because again, sometimes if you say to keep our doors open for the next 12 months, we need £3 million. If someone is only able to give £20, they think, well, what is the point? It's a drop in the ocean. So obviously, sometimes we want to avoid restricting the money, because obviously if we say your £20 will do this, then technically we have restricted that money. So legally, we can only spend that £20 on whatever it is that we've said. But we might want to give examples of what £20 could actually achieve. And so that way it means that even if people feel they can't support with a big amount, that their money is very much valued, their support will actually do something. So let's move on, because Bernard Ross, I'm sure many of you have heard about the Management Centre, and Bernard Ross and Claire Siegel in their book, The Influential Fundraiser. one that's on my bookshelf here. It's not going to fall on my head though. DSC do loads of books, and I'm sure you'll find that one there within their catalogue. But you say they actually say a good case needs to enable the reader or listener to know the following things. What is the need? How can you tell this is a pressing need? So that's that urgently. How is your organisation uniquely qualified to tackle this need? Many people think, charities, oh, there's somebody else doing that. So again, if there could be confusion, so it's about pointing out why your organisation is best placed. What will be the benefits of the donor's action? And what are the negative consequences if you fail? Now, sometimes that is referred to almost as the blackmail element. And I don't mean to be sort of, unkind in terms of that. And again, I don't want you to take that seriously in terms of blackmail. But sometimes, unless you're very careful, it can feel like blackmail. And what we don't ever want to do is send our potential donors and supporters on a guilt trip. But, we might want to actually explain. And if we're not able to provide this service, it will mean that people like Joe won't actually get the support and counselling they need to help them move on after the death of their mother. And it can just, it can actually add extra impact. So don't ever turn that into the blackmail element. So let's go back to what I said might be my underlying sort of, little sort of example here. But I can't stress enough, it's actually so vital we actually set out what the issue is. We often refer to it as a problem, but I know for some organisations say, Jill, it's not a problem, but it's where you are currently now that's not ideal. Something needs to change, something needs to happen. But in many organisations, we can say it's a need, it's a problem. Sometimes it's a thing that we want to communicate that might make people angry. They might make them cross and say, gosh, I've got to do something about this. But also sometimes it is about pointing out injustices, but sometimes it's about just helping to identify what are some of the key things out there that people perhaps might not be aware of. So in my example here, I'm thinking about a child bereavement service, but here the problem is, and it is Joe. Joe's terribly disruptive in class. All of a sudden, he won't sit still. He's being troublesome. He's disrupting other classmates. He's fallen out with all his friends, and he just wants to go and sit to one side. But understanding the problem, and your organisation might be one to help solve it. You might be an organisation that provides child bereavement to help someone like Joe come to terms with the death of his mother. So who is at the centre and what is the problem of the issue? We need to really identify that. And we can even start by using a case study or a story or an example to actually help to get the message across. Because what we want to do early on, we want to draw people in. People who are listening to our case for support, our message, people that we're communicating with, whether it's, verbally or in writing. And what we want to avoid is being boring. And I can tell you now, that's one thing I often do. It's a bit of an exercise, stuff that falls through my door. I give it a boring score. Do I really want to listen? Do I really want to carry on reading? And some of the TV adverts or the radio appeals, I think, oh gosh, I'm going to listen because I'm going to make myself, but otherwise I would normally have switched off. So early on, to be effective and create impact and be successful and get people to carry on to the end, whether it's listening or reading, we want to spark the supporters' interest. We want to grab their attention. That can be there in a title. We've got an image here, just the image, but also that title. You can give her the space to follow her dreams. I'm not even going to tell you what it's about. And you probably just started to see there's a dollar sign there. It's something I've cribbed from an American article. But I just love that image. And it's taking me in there. I want to find out more. Yes, it is a ballet post, but is it really about ballet? But also, that sort of initial title, that caption, can you give her the space to follow her dreams? Not you can, you can give her. And that's a really good sort of point as well, is what they've used there is that strong you, not can you, but you can. And it's about empowering the supporter. And that is many of us at the moment. I don't know about you, I'm a bit of a control freak at times, but so much feels out of my control. And I know how to manage that. I just have to think, what can I control and have influence over? What can't I? And at the moment, the government's saying, don't go out. So I'm not going out. I'm stopping here. I'm not spreading this virus. I want to keep safe and I want to keep others safe. But also, you say there's other things, you say we're feeling out of control. But goodness, at the moment, gosh, I could do something. And that is so strong. You can give her the space to follow her dreams. I'm going to carry on reading because there's something that I can actually do. So you say a title, an image, a quote, a case study. By telling a story, we can spark someone's interest. So they carry on, but also they get drawn in to our story. They get drawn in to what we're trying to share. But what we do need, I said before, we need to avoid boring them. And some of what I call the speed bumps along the way to securing support or a gift is, those long words and sentences, jargon and technical language. So when you've finished compiling, even if it's a script that's going to be used for a verbal communication, or if it is, a sort of a written case for support materials that you're putting together, when you're proofreading it, go back and proof it for lots of different things. Yes, proof it for grammar, proof it for English. Does it flow? Is it the same voice coming through? Because again, we're all guilty of cutting and pasting. And again, when we're not possibly sort of seeing people and chatting, they send an email and you think, oh, that's a great sentence. I'll cut and paste that. But sometimes when a potential supporter reads it, just thinking, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. And it's possibly because it's what we often refer to, the voice is slightly different. And it's because it's been cut and paste. It's what I often describe, and I can't remember if I've used this phrase before, but it's what I often call a camel. And so many sort of case for support messages or fundraising messages overall end up being like a camel. And that's a bit of a joke. What is a camel? It's a horse designed by a committee. So it's all lumpy and bumpy. I hope I'm hearing people laugh out there. I've got a weird sense of humor, but I think that's a really good analogy. What you want, whether your message is to be something that is, think of that sort of sleek thoroughbred horse that might be going on to compete in the Grand National at Liverpool. I know Kathy will be up for that because she's up in that part of the world. But you say, just think of it as that and just think, have I got lumps and bumps? Is it the flow isn't right? Is it the voice isn't right because I cut and pasted? So again, do that sort of check with that proofread. But also proofread it and just say, are these long words? Are these complicated sentences? Am I using our own internal jargon? And it's so easy to get sucked in and you just don't realize you're talking your own internal language. And fine, if this is aimed at specialists, it might be part of your message. You're communicating to a trust funder who are specialist funders in perhaps that, medical area. Then yes, reflect back their language and use the language that they will expect to hear. But if that's to a family-based trust who are going to sit around their kitchen table or going to have a Zoom connection to actually talk about, the applications that they've received, they're just going to immediately say, this is turning us off. We need, as I'm going to talk about in a minute or two, we need to really get into the heads of our potential supporter and tap into their motivations. And you say those long words and sentences, that technical jargon and the language can actually turn people off. We want it to be inclusive and informing and people to feel they want to carry on listening or reading. So let's get into that head. Now, it's all right. I'm not going to provide be in the middle of doing, dissecting somebody's skull here and getting into their brain. But let's just, when someone receives that message, that fundraising message, let's see what goes on. So first of all, the first level of response, that when people are reading or hearing something, the first thing that happens is what we often refer to as that gut reaction. So how do the senses respond to the medium? So perhaps when you're on, Channel 10, I think, is one where there's an awful lot of, is it ITV3 that, and there's an awful lot of charity adverts. So test this tonight, or possibly if you've had the Radio Times, anything else that's dropped through your letterbox, just pick that up. See, here we are, my leaflet that I've pulled out of the Radio Times. Yeah, just actually say, what's your initial reaction? So first of all, with this one that I've picked up, my first reaction is, it's fairly cheap paper. And for many people, that is one big thing. You know, if it's too top quality paper, unless it's possibly an appeal to a high net worth couple of individuals, you might want to sort of, you know, show that you're serious about this. You've taken their potential involvement seriously. But otherwise, people start to say, oh, they've wasted money on that paper. Now, again, immediately, I say I'm seeing colour. The first page, the front cover of that is as you can see, if you're seeing the little image of myself, is orange. Then we've got some photos that are in colour, a bit of green there and some more orange. We've got the Union Jack with the blue, red, white and blue as well there. So for some people say, oh, have they spent a lot on that? Because there's colour printed. Isn't that more expensive? But also, how does it look? How does it feel? Did it draw me in? Big change, start small. There was something eye-catching. It did make me actually open it and want to actually read on. I've got some engaging images that are there. So how does it look? How does it feel? So those are the things, you say, that first level of response, it makes us decide whether to carry on and read, but also sets the tone sometimes. If we are carrying on, we might be slightly skeptical, or we might be feeling very warm. So it's that first impression and that gut reaction. Then we go on to that second level of response. So once we've done that first processing, our brain goes on to this next element. How does the message appeal to the emotions? So this is what we often call the heart test. Is there an awareness of what the need is? Is it clear? Have they communicated? Have they got that across as to what is the actual problem that they're looking, that organisation who is behind this? And in this case, it's Practical Action. Do tell us if there's anyone out there from Practical Action, stick that in the box. But, you know, is it clear? And I'm not going to use this now as an example, but definitely that is really very early on, it's established. But also, not only is it established, I'm starting to feel as a human being, goodness, that shouldn't happen. I won't say I'm quite angry, but also I feel there's injustice there. I'm feeling I'm leading a privileged life compared to these people. It's about and it's about women farmers in Nepal. So again, as a woman, it's appealing to me, and it's about, you know, definitely a poorer part of the world. So it's definitely there, and it's definitely starting to appeal to the emotions and to the heart there. And then we've got that third level of response. So this is when we talk about head and heart. This is very much the head element. So does this message appeal to the reason? Does it appeal to the logic? So what we're looking for there is, when I said about point A, what's the problem that's trying to be overcome? What's the issue that wants to be changed? How is you know, the organisation trying to improve this point A? So in a way, this is, you know, do I know what point B is? Is the solution point B actually going to solve that problem? What they're proposing to do is that point that does, is it, you know, the journey that connects point A to point B? So, you know, is the message, is this information that I'm receiving, does it appeal to my reason and my logic? Because besides a big heart, I've got a big brain in there, and I want to think, is that sensible? Can they really do that? Can they achieve it with that amount of money over that time space? Can my money really make that difference? All of those things are definitely what's going on. But also the other thing is, am I being asked, is it clear what I'm being asked to do? So in terms of this, I've got a form here. It says, yes, I'll help farmers turn the tables on climate change. And so it's also, yes, I'll help. It's not saying, and this is something I also want to get across in terms of this psychology of what's actually going on in people's brains. What we want to avoid doing is making ourselves, as our charity, our organisation, what I often call pig in the middle. I think I did refer to this in one of the other webinars that we've done, but I do want to emphasise it because it really fits in with what we're talking here. We want to connect. And this is one big, powerful thing as our fundraising message, especially in these current times. We want to say, you can do this, not we are going to do this fabulous thing with your help. We want to share what the problem is, and you can be part of this solution. That is so empowering, and it's back to people feeling frustrated. They can't do lots of things, but they can make a difference. They can get involved with this solution. So yes, I can help farmers turn the tables on climate change. And it's really easy what I'm supposed to do. I can fill in this form. I can give my email address. I can go on to a website to donate. And yes, I want to make an even bigger impact with gift aid. And what a lovely phrase that is. Yes, I want to make an even bigger impact with gift aid. Again, I think I could slightly word part of the next bit a bit easier. But also, I think one thing, again, at no extra cost to yourself, you can make your gift worth even more. By signing up to gift aid, we can claim back another 25%, but also your gift, and as I said about this, will be doubled by the UK aid match money. And so again, we just really should be actually sort of stressing that point, because that is showing we're really a good organisation, because we're really going to maximise that gift that that individual or organisation is going to actually make to us. So there we are. We need to, though, get a balance between head and heart. And I did say to you about, do a bit of homework, do your own market research. Perhaps some of you will tune on to, ITV3 Channel 10 tonight. Sometimes some of those adverts, I actually switch off. I not psychologically or shut my eyes. I literally switch off. Some, they actually play too much on the heartstrings. I know they obviously work because they wouldn't carry on doing them. And I'm not necessarily their target audience. But those of you who know me, you say, you'll know I've also got two dogs at home. They've not joined me in the office yet, but you say I've got two chocolate Labradors. So sometimes when an animal welfare charity starts to show me these emaciated dogs or whatever, I just say, oh, and I know it's supposed to appeal to me, and I just say, oh my goodness, I'm an animal lover, I should let this happen. But sometimes I just can't even look. So we've got to get that balance between head and heart. And sometimes that's where we need to vary the amount of head element and the amount of heart, depending on our audience. Now, lots of people say their case for support to a trust, they're going to use a lot more of that head element, that reason, that logic. They're going to put lots of stats in there to really back up, to give evidence. But at the end of the day, one of my tests is we're down to the last two. If the trust assessors have got a scoring system, let's just say, both these last two applications that they're trying to decide which to support, because they can only support one. They've only got enough money left in their budget to support one. Everyone around the table says, right, these two have got individual equal scores. Let's just have a vote. Which do we want to support? And the one that they want to support will be the one that's got more emotion. I can tell you now. I've sat round the table, I've done it. And I won't say I've done it saying, oh, right, this has got more emotion. But I've watched that several times, and I just know it happens. Because at the end of the day, no matter who you're approaching with your fundraising message, at the end of the day, it's people who are making those decisions. So we do need to get a little bit to the heart. But with some approaches, we need to use more of that logic and reason, more of that head element, but we should always have a bit of both. Sometimes more of one, more of the other, but we should always have a bit of both. And that's with our message. So we say, as I've just said, our decision to give is made in an emotional place. In terms of our brain, it's made in an emotional place. It's not just a logical choice. And again, if referring to TV, and again, you must perhaps have been watching Kirsty and Phil with location. And sometimes they'll often talk about they're buying this house with their heart, and other times they're using their head. And it's just, I know it's a phrase we use lots of times, but again, in a way, selling and buying, it is very similar. There's lots and lots of parallels with fundraising. And so when we are trying to convince someone, inspire, motivate, inform, we need to make sure that we're using this technique of our features need to be expanded into benefits. And you remember right at the start, I was saying sometimes, we want to be giving specifics of what different amounts of money can actually achieve. I said before, you might need £3 million to keep your doors open and carry on providing the service that you are doing. So if I've got £20, I'm just going to think it's worthless. So we're talking about possibly some specifics. And again, that's my other test. When I pick up things, I'm often saying, right, what will my money do? What will my money achieve? I know my company's called Achieve Consultants. It's about, helping people to achieve their fundraising goals and potential. But it's within our fundraising message, we need to be thinking, what will someone's gift achieve? Not what will it buy? Because the buying only takes us so far. We've been talking about donors, supporters wanting to make a difference. So if you're a hospice and you say, yeah, it might cost, I've worked in lots of hospices, it's going to cost you more than £3 million to keep your doors open next year. But let's just go back to that as that example. And they're breaking it down and they're saying, oh, £100 could actually buy a syringe driver. I'm now going to use what I call the so what test. So what? Who gives a damn? A syringe driver, so what? Now, lots of you out there, I hope you don't know what a syringe driver is, but it is an automatic thing that when someone is at the final stages of life, they're often in lots of pain. And a hospice will say they should not be in pain. Anyone who's a specialist in palliative medicine says so often people at the end of their life are in unnecessary pain. So a specialist will actually make sure that, the final days of somebody's life are actually pain-free. So I'm now getting to £100 will buy a syringe driver. So someone's last few days can be pain-free. Now, do you want to give £100 to buy a syringe driver, or do you want to give £100 so someone's final few days can be pain-free? I know which is going to motivate me to give. I'm sure you're all thinking the same. And it's a pity we can't hear you because, we've got too many people on to open this up. But, just think about this. It's the benefits that really do help us to buy. And sometimes we can go on and even expand that a little bit more. Now, sometimes you've not got the time or the space, but just think of this. Sometimes, again, some of you have been on other things with me. I often talk about an onion method. The more time or the more space you've got to write something, you build up things in layers. So we might say, somebody's last few days are pain-free. And they also get chance to make up with their brother that they fell out with 10 years ago. And all of a sudden, it's even more emotive. But also you're starting to see the benefits, not just the features. It's not just this piece of machinery that's going to be pumping morphine into someone so at a regular base and on regular intervals. So they're not just having to wait till that pain is unbearable. They press the buzzer, a nurse goes as soon as they can, but then they've got to wait for it to get into the system. A syringe driver is a wonderful thing, but just saying, please give £100 to buy a syringe driver, it just leaves you cold. So we need to expand those. Just like when I bought my last car. I've told you, I've got 2 chocolate labs. I live in Suffolk. I travel up to Lancashire normally an awful lot. Not doing it at the moment. But when I went to buy my last car, yes, the benefit, I was looking for the feature. One of the features I wanted was a comfy seat because I do that long journey. It's 267 miles I regularly do each way. So I want to be comfortable. So when I get out after that long drive, I can still walk and I'm not sort of crippled with back pain. So there's the feature is the good comfy seat. The benefit is, what it means I possibly don't need to stop. To me, I am passionate about my 2 dogs. You said my 2 chocolate labs. So a feature of any vehicle that I'm going to buy is got to have a big boot because my dogs, I won't say go everywhere with me, but when I'm traveling backwards and forwards, seeing my parents and friends up in Lancashire, they're definitely going on that trip with me and not into kennels. So again, I'm sure like me, you've sat at traffic lights behind perhaps a hatchback and there's a dog sat there, it's sat up, but it can't move, it's pinned in. It might just be going 10 minutes, it might even be going to the park or the vets. But, I certainly, wouldn't want to do that with have that sort of vehicle to do that 267-mile journey without stopping regularly to let Sasha and Truffle out and let them have a stretch and a roam. But I tell you what, my boot, you say, I sometimes think I'll move into there. There's loads of space. They can have a party. They get up, they turn around, they play with some toys. They then bunch up their pillows and their blankets, and then they settle down. So I don't think I need to stop. because they need to have a stretch. They're really happy because they've got the space to move. They've also got very strong bladders as well. So no, so just use that so what test. It's a quick test. So when you're then reading something, so again, back to that proofing, whether it's something you're going to read, or sort of verbalize, or whether it's a message that you're going to communicate. And so often, especially when we're doing lots of short case for supports, we're doing lots of fundraising messages that are being condensed. So in terms of making it brief, don't then cut off that layer of the onion that carries on, and we can still answer that so what. Sometimes we just need to drill down that little bit more to make that communication, to make that message effective, so it does what it is that we're looking for. So what we need to get across is that, from point A, which is my current state, we're then going to that future state, that's point B. So within our message, we need to show that transformation has happened. So this is that thing, we've made a difference. That's one of our key motivators. People want to be involved in achieving something and making a difference. Many funders on their application forms or within their guidelines will say, we're interested in the outcomes. And it's because they're fed up of being told about that journey that links, think of that current state, the blue circle as point A, and think about future state as point B. Sometimes, and this is where it does get boring, is fundraisers, sometimes their message is bogged down and gets boring because they're telling us the journey they're going to do to tell us how something is going to be transformed. Yes, it's important to give some basic information, but the thing that we need to say, and I can't stress enough, tell us what the issue is, the situation that's far from ideal, what is the problem, what is the need, and inspire us to be part of that solution, because we want to see that come about. Don't bore us. Yes, give us some of that basic information, but don't go into what I often describe as estate agent detail, telling us all the nitty gritty about what's going to happen. On the third week, we'll be doing this, and these people will do this, and they'll be having a minibus that will bring them in. It's boring. Stop it. Keep to the real key things that are going to inspire. And this is where, again, a story can really help illustrate your impact, the change that you're going to bring about. You might start off by using a quote or even a quick story to explain, to put into context that point A, the current state. But again, carry on that story and tell people how things will actually change. Because that way, once we have got people on board, we're going to help ensure they are satisfied donors, because we're then within our thanking, and that's an important part of our fundraising message, we're going to tell them that they have made difference come about. They have helped to improve a situation. They have been part of change happening. So as well as I say, making sure we communicate, and we don't just say, thank you for your generous gift. I think I've made this point before. We want to thank them for their generosity and their gift of, because it's them that were generous, not their gift that's been generous. You see that point? It's not a generous gift. We thank the person or the organization for their generosity, for their gift of, which is going to go on, and we can then tell them. And our thank you, we've not told them then it's made a difference, but we need to tell them it will be making a difference. And that's when we then need to follow up and then inform and update. And I've got that big circle. I definitely shared that on an earlier slide. We inform, we ask, or as I often talk about, we invite them to get involved and be part of making a difference and bringing change about. We then need to thank them for their generosity and helping make a change to happen. And then we tell them and update them what has gone on. So important. But we do need to understand our potential donors' motivations, donor or supporter, our funder. They're many and varied, so we need to really get under the skin of our potential donors. So you say, it's why do people give? It's this big question of why. Sounds like those irritating children. I know lots of you possibly got 2 and 3 year olds at home, and they're probably at that stage where they're, but mummy, why? And in a way, this is where sometimes we should revert to the inner child. And again, internally, sometimes just keep saying, but why? And if you can't understand what's the why, then how can you communicate it? But what we're also trying to understand is, why will people, organizations give? And that's our big question to being successful at communicating our fundraising message. I've got two quotes here that I really love and I reflect on quite often. Just ignore the politics, whether it doesn't work with you or not. But, it's Winston Churchill. It's a long time since when he was around. But, look at that quote. We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. And then that wonderful one from Anne Frank. I was very fortunate. I've used this quote for, had it as inspiration for quite some time. In a couple of years, I was actually working in Amsterdam and got the chance then to go to Anne Frank's house. But just think about this quote. How wonderful that no one need wait a single moment to improve the world. I don't know about you, but I've got goosebumps. I know those quotes. I've seen them so many times, but I do like to share them, because I really think these get to the nub of what it is that we're trying to do. We are enabling people to improve the world, whether it's just a tiny bit of it, but they are doing something. And yes, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And we might give of our time. We might give of our time to fundraise. We might give of some of that money that we have by making a living. But what we're wanting to do to be successful in communicating our message, we want to tap in to those emotions. You'll remember I've said before, but again, this is the ideal point to come back to this for our message in current times. We really need to think about what are people's motivations at the moment. So to have a successful relationship, we need to have that win-win. We need this sort of two little green smiley faces. We don't want good for X and bad for Y, good for you, bad for them, bad for us both, or bad for us, but good for them. We've possibly, it may be a corporate we're negotiating with, make sure we're there. Maybe you give away too much. They ask for too much in return for their gift. You think, actually, it's going to cost us more to actually do this than it is to actually, have the money. We won't be spending it on what we're trying to do. We'll only be spending it on the benefits that they're going to get back. So I've just got a couple of last slides here about some current motivations and some things just to get you thinking about, what's going on, at this moment in time. So let's say, just move on and say with these last few slides. So this is around motivations or willingness to give. And it's from Enthus's autumn 2020 report. And so one-off donation to charities I personally care about. So this was part of a survey about, are they more likely to donate? No change, less likely, I wouldn't donate and don't know. So definitely we're looking at, no change means that is something that they would do, normally and carry on doing. It's no change. Yes, I'd still do that. That's what I used to do before. But also, there's an increase. So charities I personally care about. So again, this is where this you, stop talking about us and we, getting into that you, it's something you can make a difference. It's in your community. Just think about, how people and organizations that are close to our cause, think about how we can make sure we are communicating our message effectively to those. Causes specifically related to COVID, and obviously this is still at the front of people's minds. I know, before Christmas and obviously sort of, in the autumn, we were thinking things are improving. We've not gone into the second lockdown, or depending where you are in the country, because I know we've got people on this call from Ireland, from Scotland, and from over in Wales as well. We were starting to think, things are, and then it all seemed to collapse again, and we're back to where we started, or sometimes it feels even worse. But as I said, earlier on, and definitely Angus has reminded us, as well when he spoke. There is light at the end of this tunnel. The vaccine, it's being rolled out. I didn't actually catch the figures yesterday, but the day before it was 4 million. My husband is definitely in a frontline organisation. He had his jab last week. My parents, it's great news. Those people up in Lancashire, they're in their 80s, but gosh, it's 2 weeks ago since they actually had their second jab. Their safe date, not that they're going anywhere, but it was the 13th. So when we were together last time, that was the day they knew they were safe. So it was definitely not unlucky for them. So just think about it. You might not be a frontline service, but it's things that are specifically related to things that you're doing that relate to the situation around COVID and changes and the way that perhaps you're doing different things. Local community and causes, definitely there's something that's coming to the fore is, locality, your community, closeness. People are discovering their community. I live in a small village in Suffolk, and we had we only used to have a smallish number of houses, but we had 175 built last year. I sort of started the year before. And where I sit at my desk is I can actually see sort of the main road that goes through. I live on the main road through our village. Got a long drive, but I see lots of people walking. And I think, yeah, they're discovering this area. And we were very worried. And as I say, I was involved in different things, trying to oppose this planning application. But, if anything, what COVID has done, because we just thought there's going to be lots of commuters moving. They don't join in with any village activities or play any role in our community. And we just thought that they'll just live and sleep here and then go off and do things else. But they're discovering the village. They're discovering all our fabulous footpaths, especially. I know lots of people are walking them because they always seem to be very muddy and lots of footprints when I take my dogs out there. So I say, but definitely think about that local element. Even if you're a national charity, but you're targeting it in different areas, really do stress that locality. Citizen-led campaigns, so Captain Sir Tom Moore was so inspirational, and so many people, and again, so many people have done other things. We've had the lovely thing with Leeds Rhinos and the Motor Neurone Disease Association that the guy doing all those 7 marathons actually sort of carried on to support that incredible charity. But again, regular donations and subscriptions to charities I personally care about. Again, we've got these things I personally care about, and requests from friends. So again, wanting to support our friends. Possibly, we've not seen them for ages. They've asked us for sponsorship or a donation because they're taking on a challenge. We might join them in the challenge and say, oh, well, this is a great way for us to reconnect. Someone might invite you on to, a Zoom quiz. And so again, it's because your friend asked you, not because of the charity. So again, think about the power of that peer-to-peer support and asking as well. So community and work events, again, people are joining in with those. And overseas appeals still are working. So even if I know compared to some of the other figures, they don't look as good, but, things are still working. And especially for those organisations who've got that UK match funding at the moment as well. Right, just a couple of quick slides and then we're going to get to those questions. So this one I think is really quite incredible. Those of you who are either involved directly in promoting and trying to encourage people to leave you a gift in their will, and I mentioned it about this is where earlier with your message you need to drop that urgency and talk about long-term future. But you'll always, whenever there's any discussion around legacies and will writing, it's just we can't get young people to do it. We always seem to get the older generations, those baby boomers, even sort of the next level down. But look at this. This is from Fair Will, the Year in Wills report of 2020 that's fairly recently out. Look at that Generation Z. So that's all you whippersnappers out there. They've had an increase of 465% of Generation Z. But again, it's possibly communicating in the media that's right for them. They're doing more will writing at home. So it's an online will service. So no one's going to their solicitor, but more people are doing things online. But also, this 300% increase in under 35s writing wills. Solicitors who are involved in will writing and will makers will say, gosh, never before have we known this. But, we talk about lots of triggers to motivate people to write a will, and then it's those triggers that we're often trying to communicate with people when we know that one of those trigger points. And we often say a trigger point is when either someone themselves ill or people around them are ill. Well, my goodness, the whole country's ill, the whole world's ill with unfortunately, the coronavirus. But we're seeing it is motivating people to actually write their will. And if you remember, and there's when you can see the slide, I did actually share some stats from this in that last webinar, and we actually said that the day that Boris Johnson went into intensive care, we saw that Fair Will saw an increase in will writing that day. So we can say directly attributable to that. But also there was a decrease the day that the first vaccine was approved. So it's interesting. So again, some of those motivations, some of that psychology around people starting to do things. Obviously, what we don't know at this point is the how many of those Generation Z included a gift to a charity in their will. But again, there were some amazing stats I shared with you last time. But again, in the wills that they were involved with, Fair Will, they saw over £150 million being included as gifts to will in charities. If those wills came through to fruition, that's what you say charities were going to benefit from. Incredible. So finally, do remember your message. It's got to be interesting, urgent. It's got to excite and inspire. It's the donor needs to know that their support is going to make a real difference. Remember, where you can, connect the donor to your beneficiaries. Miss yourselves out. Use more of us, use less of us and we, and more of you. And do remember, if there's no difference, there's no point giving money or help. So get across the fact that that is urgent as well. So that brings us to the end of this presentation element of this webinar. So we're going to go over to the Q&A. So I'm going to sort of stop the share and we'll have a look at who we've got. So Kathy, I know you've been busy getting those questions pulled out from the Q&A box. Quick slurp of water. It's serious, it's just water.
Yep, we've had some great questions, lots of chat and loads of networking, which is really brilliant to see because the delegates and participants are from Tipperary to Cardiff to Bristol to Anglesey, the north of Ireland, Dublin, Scarborough, right across country, and loads of questions from them as well. I've tried to gather them a little bit, Jill. So I'm going to throw over to you first something around, there's a few questions around how much data. Yeah, so there's things like how much data should we use in presenting our particular identification of the problem or the issue? How important is data in quantifying the problem or a group's needs? Those kind of things. You know, how much data do we need to?
Good question. Good question. What's enough? And first of all, is that think about your audience. So I can't just give a generic answer. So always think about your audience. So some organisations and types of supporter, the message that you're presenting to a particular sort of funder or donor, that they may need more. Sometimes the more you're asking for, you may need to actually give more evidence to back up. Possibly you've got a lovely emotive case for support. Case study. You might be talking about Joe, who's been bereaved. His mother's died. He might only be 10. She was only sort of 39 when she died, has left a big hole in his life. But we might want to put that into context then. How many people are there like Joe in that situation, finding it difficult to cope, or suddenly it's not the norm to lose your mum when you're so young, but obviously unfortunately it does happen. So depending who we're then communicating, we're passing that message on to. If it is a seriously one of our larger grant making trusts, what we often refer to as an institutional type trust, they perhaps say, well, back this up. How do we know the scale of the problem? So we might want to give a couple of examples. We might even want to give a quote about this problem from someone perhaps in some sort of level of authority. It may be you're not Cruise, but you might want to sort of, Cruise is often referred to as an organisation who knows what's going on in the world of bereavement. So again, it may be from them. It might be from a director of education, say we find this is a significant issue when this sort of issue has occurred. So again, we might want to back it up with data, but also we might want to back it up with some other research from a really credible source that really adds some kick and some kudos. But sometimes data can be really cold, and sometimes it's so difficult to try and actually imagine what the scale of something is. And somebody, even in a different sort of environment, somebody is telling me about the amount of data. Somebody's phone bill was incredibly high, and they said, I don't know what's happened, but basically their child had got a hold of their phone, and rather than saying it's so many gigabytes, because to me that doesn't really sort of say that too much, but when they actually said it was the equivalent of, in 2 days they downloaded 42-hour films, all of a sudden I'm going, oh my God, it made sense to me. So sometimes you say data we perhaps need to interpret it. And sometimes when we're talking about the scale of an issue, or sometimes the amount of money, I know it's a bit old now, but I still remember it because it was impactful. Barack Obama once said, I know we just had, it's topical because of obviously Joe Biden, his inauguration yesterday. But so Barack Obama once said, $1 billion, that's the Empire State Building filled from top to bottom with dollar notes. And what we've also done there, and that's a really good technique for sharing and getting your message to be effective, you've painted a picture. And in there, I'm sure lots of you out there have just done what I did. My brain, I've got quite a visual brain, and I've just converted what I heard, what I said. I've got this Empire State Building, quite an iconic building. I'm sure most of you could identify that. And you've just got, it's full of dollar notes, and you created a picture. But that is how you also make something memorable. So when you are using stats, use that other technique that helps us be effective in terms of our communication, make it memorable. So try and link it to something. Again, it might be so many double-decker buses. How many people are we going to help in these first 6 months? That's the equivalent of, a normal bus. It's got 53 seats. A double-decker bus, I think, is 72 seats. So again, just do that rough calculation. So again, it might sound a figure that you say, well, what does that look like? What does that feel like? But all of a sudden, you've now got 10 double-decker buses in your mind driving along. And that's why very often people talk about 1 in 3, 1 in 2 will experience this in their lifetime, because all of a sudden you're saying, well, there's me and somebody else, that's one of us going to have this issue. So yeah, use statistics, use data to add impact, to demonstrate the need, and use them with different levels of intensity. But even with whatever your audience is, do try and interpret them so you're using that other technique of making them memorable. It's what I call, and what Chip and Dan Heath talk about, sticky moments. You're on mute, Kathy.
Great, thank you very much, Jill. I feel like the newsreaders now. We are going to come back to COVID for a moment, don't they always say that? We are going to come back to COVID for a moment. So there's a few COVID related questions. I'm going to put them all in together and you'll be able to pull it apart, yeah? How critical is COVID in the COVID environment, in the current message that we're giving? Somebody who works in a hospice where COVID is key to their fundraising message at the moment, and it's kind of, when do we stop talking about the pandemic? And the obviously, well, when the pandemic stops, but equally, when are our donors going to get exhausted by that message? And then there was also, how much of a COVID slant do we need to be putting in applications for next year, for example? Yourself, loads of charities were still going to be suffering from the impact. So how valid is the COVID reference in future?
Well, I think, and I didn't make this point, and I'm really glad we've had this question because it gives me a chance to come back to it. Sometimes who our beneficiary is a don't just churn out the same old message with a slight tweak. Really, do some thinking about, those different elements that I've talked about in terms of your message, and think about what elements to include. So somebody there has said, I'm from a hospice, and at the moment, yes, the primary beneficiary is, unfortunately, the person who's at the final stages of life, or being supported. They've got a terminal diagnosis and possibly having pain control or sort of symptom control. And their families, obviously. So they are still the primary beneficiary, but there's almost like a secondary and a very sort of very upfront secondary beneficiary. And for that is the people who are caring for them. And that is at the moment part of the message that people want to know about. Again, you can't turn on your TVs without hearing about people who are at the front line of it. And no matter where you are, but obviously I'm just using the particular hospice example. So even some sort of organizations where you are very much at the front line, you are sort of, in direct contact with people who may have COVID, or there is a risk that they could be carrying the infection. I do think we need to be sharing, say, two beneficiaries. We've got this, but again, it's costing us more at the moment, whilst we're still able to support people who are whatever the situation is. We want to tell you, and it's almost back to the questions people ask. Well, what's happening about those nurses, those care assistants, those people who are serving them their meals, those people at the front line who are actually, they themselves are actually at risk of catching COVID because they themselves are caring. So it might be those people in a care home. We've heard some lovely stories about people who locked themselves in for 3 months in the care home. They weren't leaving, they were sleeping in store cupboards, so they didn't catch it. So they may become the secondary hero or even the primary hero. These people are here so that we can carry on supporting the people that we're here to support. So again, we might need dual beneficiaries. And again, think, as I said when we showed you that lovely skeleton walking along, and I said put about the flesh on the bones, think about the questions people want to ask, things they want to know at the moment. So that is where we should be thinking, what is the impact? So where you're in direct sort of service delivery around that area, then yes, but also is, how have your services been affected? That is the question that many people are going to ask. So again, you perhaps are doing things differently. You may be doing more one-to-one things because it's more difficult to get perhaps a group discussion. Possibly, you're a mental health charity, you're doing counselling work, but people aren't connecting in the same way. They don't want to do a Zoom call with 5 other people talking about the issues. It's perhaps more face-to-face. So what it's meant is the way that we used to deliver our services has been impacted on COVID by the current pandemic and the restrictions. We're now doing this differently, and this has meant, and as a result of that, we need more money because we need more equipment to enable us to help people who perhaps are about to commit suicide. Get back down to the bottom line. What is the difference? What's the issue? What's the problem? It's how we're doing it, but we need to perhaps build in that what has changed at the moment. And so, as you say, we're going to still be in this situation for some time, because even when everything is hopefully going to return more normal later on this year, but charities have still been impacted. Again, some charities, they're going to be doing more work because their staff, almost they're going to have post-traumatic stress disorder. There's going to be mental health issues. There's going to be well-being issues that people need to be supported who have been at the front line. So back to, they've now got 2 beneficiaries. The people who've been delivering the service, the heroes in our story, have somehow now become the people who need to be supported and cared for. But any charity is going to lack of income, staff have left, or because we've had to restructure, we've had to unfortunately lose staff. So again, your organizations are going to be affected long term. So we still need to bring it in. We've done some changes. So again, people say for many people, we no longer have reserves to buffet us. So whilst we are asking for 100% of the money, normally we would look to pump prime some of the project work ourselves from the money that we're raising. However, we're having to ask for 100% of the funding now because we've lost some of our income streams, or we've lost some of the money that we would have raised to pump prime this during the last year. So think about where it's appropriate, think what's different and how best to share that. Not to make a sob story, but to actually show the impact, because this is not a short-term impact. People's lives are going to be affected long-term. There's lots of people, you say, have lost someone very dear to them as a result of this. When you know that, it's going to reach 100,000 people are going to have died who've had COVID. That's going to have affected lots of people directly and indirectly. And the way our organisations are going to work is going to change. significantly or in different ways because of what's going on. So I don't think now's the time for emergency appeals. We've had that time. We had the big impact. But again, we might do something about our new services because of how we're dealing because of the continuing COVID crisis. I think that is definitely a word. And who'd have thought, you said back in the summer that January would have been across the whole of the UK would have been in lockdown again.
Great. Thank you, Jill. I'm going to give you a quick one. You might say defer, refer, but a couple of people want the source, explaining how the Infused Donor Pulse report is compiled, the number of respondents, consultation. Is there a quick place you can defer people
yeah,
to?
Just go to Infuse website.
Google Infuse.
Yeah,
okay.
and it does have the sample size and things in there. So
okay, that's great. Yeah. There's a number of questions then around the heart message, how to appeal to the heart message. So one was so one was you know when certain funders have the professional evaluation sort of methods, glossary and that kind of thing, you know, how important is it still then to speak to the heart as well as the mind? Another question around the heart was what about for faith-based organizations? How do you appeal to the heart when there might be a limited community that would appeal to, and then funding for capital appeals for buildings? I know you've had that question 100 times. Okay, I'll leave that with you then.
Right, I'm scribbling them down. So what you say, we've got 10 minutes. So I want to cover definitely those parts. So going back to that, you know, it's an institutional type funding. So yes, less of the heart. You know, I said, you know, more of the head, less of the heart for that. But at the end of the day, they still want to make a difference. And so often you're asked for those sort of the soft things, you know, your softer objectives. So how do people feel? So again, you know, that's going to be important. So yes, you know, how many people have got a qualification, but, you know, so that is definitely a hard objective. You know, that's measurable. It's really clear. It's really easy. But very often you're given the chance to talk about those softer objectives. So things like confidence, how people felt. You know, it might even be self-esteem. You know, how did they feel about something? Did they feel more able to cope? So again, going back to that bereavement thing, there's an awful lot of feeling in there. Yes, I felt more able to cope. So 9 out of 10 people who went through our counselling process felt they were able to cope. But also, you know, I felt I didn't, you know, erupt in tears as much. You know, so think about some of those softer objectives that sometimes are less quantifiable, but, you know, again, there still are measuring tools. I love the outcome star as a way to actually, what is the shift from where you start with something to then after you've been through a particular program? And yes, it gives you a nice sort of some of those really lovely hard objectives, but also it helps you quantify some of those softer objectives. So yes, still think at the end of the day, it's still people, but yes, they've got a big score chart and it's a numbers game. But just remember, and I know I say this quite a lot, you're down to the last two. You've got equal scores. They can only fund one. So at the end of the day, people have got to want to support you. So always think about it when, you know, the competition's really heavy, and it's really heavy at the moment. So do all the, you know, the head stuff that you need to do. Make sure you answer the question. And when you can, just slip in those other things. So it's a quote that can be so moving from a service user or a family member of a service user or from somebody in a community that just adds something and starts you really thinking, what is it all about? In terms of faith-based organisations, I say, obviously, sometimes people who say there's a limited audience, it's really interesting. There was something I saw with Justin Welby only recently. It's not obviously faith isn't just Church of England, but there has been this searching, what is the meaning of life type of thing. And again, there's some stuff out there that is saying more people who turn into religion than previously they have, to try and find sort of some meaning, some people have also got more time. You know, I used to say sometimes, you know, a regular church service on a Sunday morning where somebody gives a sermon for, you know, 3/4 of an hour, when people said, oh God, I've got to pick up the kids, or the kids should be at football practice, or got to do this, I've got to do the shopping because everyone's working, we need to do the shopping in normal times rather than this. But again, people are starting to look for other things for you know, spirituality to help them possibly get through this, but also perhaps you say people have had time to reconnect with possibly some family values, some traditional values that existed within, their support network, their family and friends, that network. So if you're a faith-based charity and looking to a specific audience, I think you'll find it's growing. And sometimes it's about thinking about, sometimes your terminology, your wording, some of that can appeal to a wider audience as well. Perhaps it isn't just the whole world, as I often say, the whole world is your potential target when you're looking at possibly individual giving. Everyone out there, you might start to restrict it, but also you want to prioritize. You want to look at who you're going to be most successful with whenever you're doing any sort of fundraising. You want to prioritize. You don't want to waste your time communicating with people or organizations you have no chance of success with. You might say this thing that fell out of my letterbox, but we might say, well, it's a way to get our message across to a new audience. If I'm not interested, I'll put it to one side. So think about your acquisition process, but also think about who you want to be regularly communicating with. And again, more and more that we're seeing is charities who are being successful at the moment are those who are really concentrating hard on their donor journey, their supporter experience, their stewardship, all that language, it means the same thing. Look after the people who have already supported you, whether they've given you cash, whether they've volunteered, or whether they've given you their time to raise money. And again, I often say this, fundraising is about your P's and Q's, good managed. You say please and you ask nicely in a way that's appropriate to your audience, but you say thank you. And I can't stress this enough. You say thank you as quickly as possible. And you also then back it up with that updating and informing. And those charities who are doing really well, they've not furloughed fundraisers. I was listening to and talking to someone only last week, and they didn't furlough their community fundraising team. It's a larger charity, but they've got a huge uptake of people doing second and third things and retaining supporters because they pivoted their community team because they recognized people who are very much involved in community and event fundraising are often talking to fundraisers and supporters to motivate, encourage, inform, find out what's important to them, all those sorts of things I think are often second nature, but it's about being nosy, but about giving them information back, finding out what makes them tick, why are they doing this? And then those charities who are pivoting their community to make contact, and they're doing lots more supporter care because people are bored, they're at home a lot more. So to get an email, to get a phone call, to get some sort of video clip showing a little clip of a beneficiary who wanted to say thank you for enabling them to go to school, a child out in Africa who never had the chance to go to school before, you've adopted a child, to get that video clip at the moment and somebody telling you, you are incredible. Kathy, you're incredible. What you've enabled this girl out in Africa, normally at 13, she'd be being married off. She will be pregnant by next year. She'd be having a baby that might kill her because her body's not even ready to have that child. She's a child herself. But you, Kathy, have made a difference. And if you saw her there on a screen, that's going to really inspire you. So definitely think about your audience and think about that relationship that you want to carry on and build. So part of our communications, our message is to update our message with news stories, because we're going back to a lot of the same people because they want to carry on supporting, but they want to be taken on that journey, the fundraising journey as we talk about it, but also that journey of support. So when you're talking to them for the third or fourth time, if they said, oh, stop calling me Miss Shimin, do call me Kathy, all those things are important. But if they keep saying and signing themselves as Miss Shimin OBE, then make sure you respect that and go back to it. I don't know, you were in the gongs list. Now, going back to that capital appeal, now, in terms of our message, I don't know what particular aspect of that question. I can talk for England on capital appeals. I literally was running a capital appeal when this thing hit. I can talk to, if someone, I say again, I'm not throwing it open to everyone, but if someone's got a real, very, very specific, then feel free just to stick something in the chat, we'll find it. Put your contact detail. So if it's a very, first 5 people I'll just get back to on that one. But in terms of our message, whether it was about the urgency, because we're only doing it next year, but we need to talk about the problem, and also the fact that we've started thinking about this, that in the next 3 years, we're going to be past capacity or whatever it is. We want to provide a new service. One of the things I must stress about a capital appeal, though, is, you know, on the whole, no one is inspired by a building, the thing that you're either trying to buy, because it might be a huge piece of equipment. It might be one of those hospitals. You want this new scanner that can detect, you know, there's going to be a backlog of cancer patients, people who've not had a heart, problems identified. So again, sometimes in order to deal with this, we need more equipment, and it might be the charitable trust element of a hospital who's doing this. So, but overall, it's back to, you know, unless you're seriously techie, you know, you're not really interested in all the gizmos, widgets, whatever this thing can do. It's that, you know, but by having this extra scanner, it will mean we can do double the amount. We can get, you know, 15 people scanned a day. So this will mean that 30 people can have a heart problem identified. We can get to them quicker. We can save lives. That's our key message. The scanner is the instrument to enable us to achieve that thing and to make the difference. Yes, we need to tell them a little bit about it, about the building, but unless you're a firm of architects or that is your specialist thing, again, I'm doing a project with heritage organisations at the moment, and some, you know, there are some funders, some individuals out there who are passionate about, you know, these stone million windows that need to be restored, or, you know, the Georgian fireplaces or whatever it is. But overall, it's what this building will enable you to do. And again, I was talking to someone who wants to restore their 18th century coaching house within some grounds. But it's going to be a centre for wellness. It's about well-being, and people around, they're going to have yoga, they're going to have healthy cooking lessons. So it's about what is the issue that this capital appeal is trying to solve. And it's that people in that area are in a really deprived area, don't have access to lots of things that help them feel better, to improve their life chances, blah, 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 and this is going to enable it. So really, most of our donors really don't give a toss about the actual, it's a 18th century coaching house with these lovely oriel windows, blah, 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 blah. It's what's going to go in there and the difference that it will make. So I hope that has helped some people who are thinking about capital appeals. So, goodness, we're there. It's that time. It's not midnight, but it's noon. So it's not fisticuffs at high noon, I say. And if this was midnight and I was Cinderella, I will be about to turn into rags, and my coach that's on the driveway will be about to turn into a pumpkin. Look, we've had a fantastic time with you this morning. I hope we've got through as many questions and some, thanks, Kathy, for putting them into general things. So that's been great. So thank you to you all out there. It's been, as I said, an absolute pleasure. We've got one more, but, you know, these sessions are going to be on the Ecclesiastical website. Do go and check that out for other information. And there's lots of stuff out there with DSC as well. Stay in touch. And for those of you who are able to join us, we're talking about virtual fundraising on the 2nd of February. Take care. Have a good few weeks. Go sock it to them with that fundraising message. Thank you all very much indeed. Bye.